I guess this is working pretty good now. Good morning to those of you in the Western Hemisphere. Um, Welcome to the Dominance Academy. I'm streaming live in the mountains of Sapa in Vietnam. It's 9:23 p.m. here, so I understand this is not a usual stream time for my usual watchers, but maybe for people in other parts of the globe, this is just fine. But I didn't want to pass up this opportunity to get in touch with you guys and kind of fill you in with what I'm doing here and talk about a couple of things. But first, my trip over here has been really cool. It's uh it's been an adventure in many ways. Um Vietnam, actually, I'm in Hanoi earlier, and then I'm in Sapa now, and then Hanoi again. And Hanoi is a very interesting place. Um, like parts of it are very old, such as called the Old Quarter, and the buildings are historic, so they can't knock them down and put in new ones. They have to keep them, and so there's a lot of old buildings falling apart, but the architecture is incredibly old, and it's very apparent, right, how old these things are. I went to some temples, and I walked into temples that were built in the 11th century. So it's wild to be walking on stones that are that old, touching pillars that are that old. Pretty incredible, like how much history is preserved here. And so I was in Hanoi for a little while, and then came up to Sapa via train, and it was an overnight train. Took quite a while. And the train itself was very old. It's not like some new fancy Amtrak that's like smooth and so on. Everything's compact, everything's old, everything's rickety. The whole thing goes clack clack like all night long, which actually I really like. I quite enjoy old trains. Actually, I enjoy trains of all kinds. So, um, hmm, don't know what that is. So, anyways, so yeah, and then that's just into Sapa. And then once you're there, you need to get a car to then drive, 30, 40 minutes up into the mountains. And that's where I'm at now. So if you've seen any of my Instagram stories, you'll see the the views that I'm at. And basically like this place is so high up. I'm literally in the fucking clouds. Like in the morning, the clouds are just right here, right where where I'm at, which is pretty cool. There are no roads to speak of up here. Um, it's either dirt or rocks, and these rocks are like the size of racquetballs. Like that's the road, just these chunks of rock. So I felt bad for the guy's suspension driving up here, and it's just wild to see dudes on mopeds just like flying across this stuff, right? Um, it'd be challenging even on a motocross bike, but these guys on mopeds with regular street tires on them, and they're just flying down the hills and up the hills on these rocks, sometimes with like their wife behind them, and then in between them, like a 2-year-old baby, like standing up, like squashed between them, and maybe like some kind of piece of luggage on the back. Crazy, crazy stuff. Very ingenuitive. A lot of stuff is hand built, but I don't know, it just has a lot of charm. And I spent today in the town of Sapa, and that's down the mountain just a little bit into the valley, and it's really unique because the area has influences from Vietnam, China, um, the Hmong, which is like the predominant culture that's here in Sapa, and as well as the French. And because there was a time, I don't know the history very well, but there was a time period when the French were occupying this area, and so, but as well as the Chinese. So it's originally Hmong, and while Vietnamese are the most prevalent throughout Vietnam, in Sapa specifically, they're a minority. and it's mostly Hmong. And but because of all the over time, the generations and different influences here and there, it's everywhere. So the food is like this weird mixture. The architecture is this weird mixture of like the French, the Chinese, the Vietnamese, and the Hmong. It's really cool. Um, People are super friendly. Um, like everybody is just pleasant, willing to talk to, um, very open to conversation, willing to help. Uh, Always just a smile on their face. There's no traffic lights whatsoever. Everyone just negotiates with like, feel, like a social feel. And and just everyone, it's kind of, it looks like a free for all at first, but then but then you kind of, you're in it for a little while. It's like, yeah, everyone is pardon me, like silently communicating with each other. And you'd think that there's a lot of accidents, but there's not. Like in the United States, we have traffic lights and all these laws and rules and all this stuff, far less congestion that there is here, yet we have way more accidents. Like you'd think that there are a lot of accidents around these parts, but there's not. There really isn't. So, so yeah, that's been my thing. And then tomorrow I'm heading back to Hanoi to work on some things. So, but but yeah, so that's been my time here. Um, but yeah, I wanted to talk about a certain area of your development, your training, as a man, as a dominant, and it has to do with conviction. And there's a certain steeliness, right, that comes from making decisions, and the the decision starts off first within you, okay, before it gets extended out through your voice, through choices, actions, and so on. You need to first come through yourself, okay, and it goes through your internal government, and usually quite quickly. But the thing is that a man needs to learn how to stand on his convictions and not really ever have a back and forth with himself, like in the same sense that you'd never want to have a back and forth with a woman. You don't want to have the same back and forth with yourself. And that's how you get practice with never having a back and forth with a woman, right? Because you need to have that settled. Those muscles need to be conditioned within you in order to get comfortable with that, to know what it feels like to really land on something and not have this other little voice in your head saying, yeah, but what if this happens? Or, geez, I don't know if that's the right decision. Or, I hope nobody makes fun of me. Or, I hope nothing bad happens. Or whatever the thought is. Okay. That thought can't be there, right? Because that's doubt, right? And if you're a fan of Frank Herbert's Dune, doubt, actually, well, fear is the mind killer, but doubt is as well. Actually, I think the quote about doubt is from The Gentleman. Yeah. If you haven't seen The Gentleman, that's a fantastic fucking movie. Really, really good film. But yeah, doubt is the mind killer as well. And you can't expect a woman to not doubt you if you are doubting yourself. So so that's where the conviction comes into play. Okay. And these are just things that you have to come to believe in yourself. Okay. And that's where faith is really strong, right? If you talk to like devout theists, they have a very strong faith. Like, despite, rational objections to whatever their faith is, they still hold on to it. And they say, no, this is the way, this is the case. And that's the sort of steadfastness that you need to embrace within yourself. It's incredibly important, because this starts that conversation with yourself about who to trust. And I think that a lot of guys today, and it's probably largely due to the fact of either having no father figures or weak father figures growing up, in combination with the influences of social media and really developing that secondary identity, that secondary consciousness of this self of you that's also out there, that is subject to criticism and analysis and judgment. That I think that fractures the identity, and this keeps you in a place of submission. It keeps you in a place of submission to that fracturing, to that influence. Okay. And this really can't stand, right? You cannot develop an identity that is as dense as dense as stone, that is driven into the ground several meters, such that nothing can push it over. If you have influences coming at you from the outside, it's really, really important. Actually, I was about to say alabaster, but um, granite is what I wanted to say. A pillar of granite. Granite is incredibly dense. I remember back in college, I was studying sculpture, and I wanted to do some carving, and we had a chunk of granite in like the back area, the yard of the sculpture studio. And my professor warned me against it. He's like, Justin, don't do it. He's like, that is one of the most frustrating pieces of material to ever lay your hands on. Um, it's not smooth, it's not forgiving, and you'll use a lot more energy trying to carve it than actually getting anything done. So I tried it out just for a little while, just to see what he was talking about, and he was absolutely right. But yeah, having an identity sense where there is no question of who you are to yourself, that is so dense and so clear that it is like a pillar of granite that is several meters tall and driven into the ground several meters, such that no storm could ever move it. Okay. But the thing is, that's the interesting part, is that it can be in a storm, just not taken over by it. So, what does that look like? That looks like you can be in a dramatic scenario with a woman. You can be in a dramatic scenario in life with work, family, parents, um, any kind of scenario you can think of. And that's what happens. Okay. Life will throw you curveballs, right? It'll throw you curveballs with your health, your money, the stock market, your job, friends, family, lovers, all sorts of stuff. It's not like this fairy tale that you are ingesting on social media that says, hey, if you get all of your shit together, no complicated or challenging things will ever happen to you ever again. And that's just false. And quite frankly, a man with a capital M would never want it to be that way. Why? It doesn't make any sense. Okay. Someone once told me, I can't remember what the full quote is, but it's something along the lines of a sailor is not built by keeping their boat in the harbor. A sailor is made by the challenges of the sea, and that's really what must happen in order to create grit. Okay, you actually have to face things, and by facing things, that's not getting into an argument with somebody on Instagram in the comments section of a video or YouTube or whatever. Like that doesn't develop grit. Okay. Grit is developed with life right in front of you. And If you can't hack it, well, then when you're actually facing these things, you have to dig in deeper and make yourself hack it. That's what creates resolve, right? That's one of those conversations with the self that I talk about, with saying I can do this. I believe in myself. And the thing is that none of it, well, mostly none of it is fatal. So if that particular situation doesn't work out precisely as you wanted it to, um, there's always tomorrow. There's always tomorrow. So, I mean, unless you do something that puts your life in peril. So, but let's hope you're not dumb enough to get into situations like that, or just misfortunate. I think most of us are not facing life or death situations on a daily basis. But this sort of stuff is really what carves an edge on your soul. And that's partially the problem with guys today. You're not doing anything or experiencing anything to create an edge, right? With the sandpaper of life, standing away bullshit. All right. Because you can bullshit yourself all day long. You can think you're fucking cool. You can think that you're a man. You can think that you have a strong spine and a full set of balls. You can think this all day long in the safety of your apartment or your home, behind your shiny laptop or your little phone. And this can make you feel and generate this impression that you are something that you think you are. But all of that will fold if you step foot in front of a challenge. It'll fold when you step foot in front of a woman. When she challenges you. Now, I know that a lot of guys, a lot of teachers online, they'll say, "You know what? Fuck these women who challenge you, right? That's disrespect." And it's like, how can you possibly expect a woman who's a complete stranger to give you respect off rip? How? Now, that doesn't mean she has to be disrespectful, but how can you expect respect? Okay, it should be neutral. And oftentimes, what you are perceiving as disrespect through her testing is actually just to see if you are a solid man, because she knows you don't know this because you don't interact with quite as many men as a woman would, and not on the same level, in the same context. Okay, you don't, when you interact with men, you're not looking at them in the same way that a woman would. You're not scanning for certain things, certain feedbacks, right? We have a different set that we're looking for, but they're looking for solidity. Are you opaque or are you transparent? And by that I don't mean honesty. I mean, like, does like do you have mass? Okay. And I'm not talking about your physical body. Okay, but does your spirit have mass? And if you fold by her just saying a little something that just lightly taps at your masculinity, and you fold from that, then she's like, oh, like, how could I possibly put give my will to this person? Because this is ultimately what they want to do. I don't think you guys realize this, but the spirit of a woman, okay, there's that little girl that I've talked about that's inside, and their greatest desire is to just feel freedom and safety at the same time, but from a little girl's perspective, not your grown woman, you know, uh, d- independence, freedom. Like, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about emotional freedom, and and that little girl really wants to feel safe. This is what's at the core of practically every woman, and that's what they're looking for. They're looking for the containment such that they can feel this way and really pour themselves into the man's vessel. And it must be solid enough to contain this. And if she senses that from just a little tap on your exterior that it dents, she's like, "Oh shit, like I barely even touched him." And he's upset. He's he's clutching his pearls. He's writing comments, making posts, blowing up my phone, called me a bitch, started, freaking out, saying that I disrespected him, whatever. You know what I'm saying? And it was just a tap, and his massive dent formed, like it's made out of tinfoil, right? You hold up tinfoil, it looks like, if nobody knew what it was, they might think that it's like steel or something, right? It can look solid, but you just tap it and it just shreds like actually easier than paper does. And this is what a lot of guys do, right? Because they don't understand that masculinity is not formed by what can be seen. That's the trick. But then that leaves a lot of confusion as to like, well, how does a man really develop in such a way that they are impervious to practically everything? And that doesn't mean you will never bleed when you get cut. It means your soul can never be dented. It's never challenged. It's never cut. It can't be crushed. It can't be even be moved, despite what happens to your body. This is the strength that has been lost to men. This is part of the reason why society is crumbling all around us in the West, because men have become nothing. Even in their external pursuits and their external development, they really are nothing. They're a bunch of nothings. And I'm sad to say that. I really am. There's posturing. And it's, partly due to just not having a proper guide, not knowing how to actually be a man, right? Because be implies being, right? It's not a doing, it's not a seeing, it's a being. How often when we're growing up do we hear about how to be? All we hear is about what to do, how to be seen. And all of this stuff can be manufactured. As we well know on social media, there's plenty of people who manufacture some sort of image, and some of them appear to be very manly men. But a lot of times it's just posturing. Because where do they learn this from? What helps them develop their core? What is it based on? Is it truly based on a set of known values, principles, codes, and rules that they live by, that they would die by, right? This is what I mean about having conviction. Conviction is what creates that pillar, the faith and the belief in self. But it's like, you got to question, well, what am I believing in? You can't just say, oh, I believe in me when you don't know who the me is. You see what I'm saying? It takes time to sort that out and define this. Part of it comes from life experience, seeing how you handle things. And when that small internal voice comes up, some people like to call it your conscience. Um, I don't know what it is, but that's telling you to do the right thing. This is what separates you from males in one aspect, is listening to that voice that's telling you to do the right thing and not ignoring it, not justifying other things, not sweeping it under the rug, not blowing it off. Okay, but really listening to it and then doing what it says. And this is when you become a man of your word, a man who says what he does and does what he says. He has convictions that he follows. That's immovable. And when you are like this all the time, it starts changing your demeanor. It starts changing how you show up. It changes how you walk. But nothing really changes drastically. Like, say, someone saw you on the street, and then months later, after, say, you've been, working on this stuff, they wouldn't see any massive difference in you, but they might feel something. They might feel something of your presence, which is a bit different. Your presence might be different. It's kind of like that old story that I bring up from time to time about the boy who comes across a monk who's walking, and he's like, "Monk, let me ask you a question. What's being enlightened like?" And the monk thinks for a second. He goes, "Well, everything's pretty much the same, but you're just 2 inches off the ground." And that 2 inch shift changes your perspective on everything because it's a totally different angle. But rocks are still rocks, trees are still trees, you know, buildings are still buildings. But how you see and how you interact, everything is just slightly different. Okay. And slightly is the key word because that's all that's needed. You guys think that transitioning from male to man is some sort of drastic shift, and it's just a slight shift, but it's quite significant. Like, for example, I've got a client who he's fairly new, been with him like just for a couple of months, and he came to this new this new realization about sex. And he had a pretty standard relationship with sex, coming from, just a regular guy. He's like, yeah, I like it. He likes fucking. He's got a strong sex drive, but it was all purely physical, purely uh, nerve endings and things like that. Okay. Purely physiological. And he's been working with me, and I'm slowly just shifting him. All right. Providing the right tools so that little shifts happen, just like clink, 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 clink. And he's just slowly changing his degrees at which he perceives something. And I recently spoke with him, and he's like, I don't know what really happened, but I see sex as something completely different now. I relate to it totally differently. It means something totally different. And I had to remind him that the funny part is that if he were to see himself having sex, say like maybe a recording or something like that, he wouldn't be able to say that anything has really visually changed. But it's the relationship too. And now he's no longer coming at sex purely for physical enjoyment. He realizes that it's this neutral tool that can be utilized in any number of ways, and it can be used to transform someone. It can be used to transcend certain mindsets. It can be used to heal. It can be used to harm. It can be used to redirect. It can be or realign. Um, there's all sorts of ways that sex can transform. Okay, it's not just about pleasure, and he's been working hard about releasing himself from those lower, more simplistic views, those lower energies, right? If you're into chakras, it's like the first and second chakras, right? Survival and sex. And when you start coming up out of that, start releasing yourself from those things and start looking at things differently, that's when you start opening up and developing, letting go of what's been holding you there with just that. Okay. Because a lot of it has to do with being afraid that you're never going to have it again. All right. This is scarcity mindset. All right. So the person who it's funny, um, I've rescued a number of animals in my life. Um, only one of them was from a pound, a dog from a pound. The rest have just been street animals. And I had this cat, and I picked him up off the street, and he was quite young, so he wasn't living on the street for very long, but enough of that street survival instinct had developed to where whenever he found food, he would just gorge himself because his body knew that it might be days or a week or longer before he found food again. He had no idea when he would eat next. So he would just try to just stuff himself. And so, I mean, that's just what happens when you're on survival mode. Okay. And and so I brought him in. He was a kitten. And for quite a while, I'd say maybe like a year or two, he still did that. I would put some food down and he would be done with it in seconds. Just wolfed it down. Okay. He wouldn't do like what you regularly see with cats. They just kind of like casually lick at the food, right? We're talking like wet food. He was taking bites, like just chomping it down. I'm like, damn, but I kept the schedule, same amount of food all the time, every day. And over time, his mind started to change and go, oh, okay, so this stuff just keeps coming. Like I don't have to like be so tense all the time. I don't have to be so hungry. It's just going to keep coming. And then eventually that survival hunger started to subside. Now he just picks, he'll go up to his dish and take a few licks and be like, that's all I need. I'll come back later, you know, and just pick at it the way like a lot of cats do. And the same thing can happen with sex. You can be in this scarcity mindset where you're hungry for it, such that you're grasping for sex. And then when you do get it, it's like you want to wolf it down, just as he did, just taking bites after bite of wet food, as if to say that the sex that you're getting might be the last sex you might ever see for who knows how long. So you better get it while it's good, right? Whether they say smoke him if you got him. So and he, he had this. A new guy who's talking to me has this, and a lot of guys have this. They have this scarcity mindset, and it can actually give them what they are seeking. But with somebody who's in a scarcity mindset, how do I explain this? It satisfies the hunger, but it doesn't make that relationship ever dissipate. So someone who is conditioned for starving, a lot of times, now this is not animals, like, it's a little bit more complex with humans, but you can give them the thing that they're, supposedly starving for again and again and again, and they'll still remain hungry because, these associations are deep, right? It's not just sex, right? Sex is rarely just about sex. It's mostly about other things. Control levers. If you're into Freud, it's about, either recreating or trying to create what you didn't have growing up with your mother, right? I know there's probably a lot of therapists who or psychologists that want to counter his angles, but I've found that this to be absolutely true with the number of men that I've worked with. They either want to recreate the the feeling, it's not about like actual mom, but the feeling that came from mom, that sense of completion, that sense of validation, okay, the closing of the circle, and from their mother. Or it's if they didn't have this growing up and they're working to create what they didn't have. And this is really prominent. And you can. have girl after girl after girl, and it doesn't go away, right? So feeding doesn't do that. It's like trying to cure alcoholism by drinking more alcohol. It just doesn't happen. It just makes the need go away when you're feeding for alcohol, right? So that's really a lot of times what's going on with sex with most guys. They're trying to do this. Okay. It's not coming from a place of being grounded, having a good relationship with sex. And a good relationship is such that it doesn't affect you, right? Just like any other like scenario, substance, thing, whatever it is. There's like these innate or inanimate objects, and they can, if you have a terrible relationship with it, it can completely sway what you do and how you see things, how you see yourself. And it just becomes that much more complex when we're dealing with sexuality. But once you unravel all that stuff, okay, that's when you can start doing things. You can be free. And that's the weird part. Okay. Like a starving person would probably make a terrible chef. You see what I'm saying? The chef can be creative because he's not in survival mode. He's not in a state of need. He's not needy. He's not a victim. He's not like a victim of circumstance. He's not yeah, he's not trying to just fill that bottomless cup, right? And so since he's not in that state, it relieves him from that, and the chef can now be very creative and say, well, what if I do this? What if I do this? And they start dreaming and fantasizing and planning and concocting all sorts of crazy shit. That's the same kind of freedom you have as a man when you release the grips that sexuality has over you. Okay. And this doesn't come from denial. That's the interesting part. Um, this goes back to that granite pillar. Okay. You can't it's like sometimes hard to conceptualize, but it's the same thing with like emotions and them having sway over you. The sexuality is the same. And once you've released yourself from that, that's when you can be creative because there's no longer anything attached to it. That's the interesting part. There's no fear, there's no anxiety, there's no competition, there's no ego, there's no pride, there's no validation. Um, there's nothing there. There's really nothing there. So because that layer is gone, now you can authentically interact with sexuality. And that's when you can start saying to yourself, okay, well, what do I want to do? Because you're no longer trying to prove anything to yourself or to the woman or trying to impress her or become validated through her or anything like that. Okay, the entire thing, both the scenario, what you're doing, and the woman now becomes an entire canvas for you to paint on or an entire piece of marble for you to sculpt. And that's where a lot of fun comes into play. The fun comes in the sculpting. And that's what the client is coming to. He's just stepping into the threshold of that realm of thinking. And because he's releasing, well, a lot of stuff. He's releasing the the guilt, the shame, the attachments, the mother wounds, as well as the addiction to pleasure. Well, what he thought was addiction to pleasure. Okay, that's what it looks like on the surface, but we dig and we dig and we dig and we understand like there's this whole other like subterranean mechanisms at play. And we started just taking the pins out and making these armatures just crumble and fall. And he's releasing himself of this stuff. And now he can breathe again. He's like, holy shit, like I can breathe, right? It's like, yeah. Now it's like everything is it's blank, okay? But now so there's this anxiety of the blank page, but there's also the excitement of the blank page of what do I do now? What do I want to do? And so I have him on some, specific assignments to start stoking the coals of creativity in his mind. Say, well, what do you want to do? What do you want to create with your woman? How far outside the bedroom do you want it to extend? Like, just the living room? Or do you want to go out into the yard? Do you want to extend into the entire world? And what does that look like in detail? And I know a lot of guys, they'll be like, damn, I don't want to do that. I just want to get a nut. It's like, okay, that's fine if you're like 22. All right. If you're between the ages of like, 16 and 22, like that's fine. You should just be out there having fun. All right. But if you're a grown male, right, you're coming like 25 plus, you need to start letting go of those boyish things, right? Letting go of the boyish holds that sexuality has over you. Okay. And if it does, you got to figure out like where those levers are. All right. So you can start undoing this stuff. Oh, Gammy page, sucky sucky, $5 me love you wrong time. It's not love, it's rub. Get it right. So um yeah. But the girls here are really cute. Um just to deviate, going back to the thing that I've picked up about the culture here, it's fairly traditional. And there's not just like girls like out like on their own. Like pretty much every girl is with their family until they're married. And they expect that like if they get with a guy, she's going with him. Like it's like it's his responsibility now. So that's the basic mentality. There's not like in the States where you see girls out and about and she's like, got her own life, her own thing going on. Like she's got her own like whole thing. Okay. That's separate from her family. And separate things can happen to her and her family won't know about it. Like she could get pregnant, her family won't know about it. She could even get engaged, her family won't know about it. Um, she could get married, like all sorts of stuff, like entire life path can happen without any connection to her family. And that's not the way it is here. It's not the way. Like you get with a girl, it's like kind of expected that you're taking her. There's no like one night stand culture here. Okay. It doesn't really exist. Um, except in the way of like, prostitutes and stuff. It was funny. I was in Hanoi and my first night, I'm like standing outside. I finally got up packed and I just was like standing out in front of the building. It was late. And this woman rolls up on a moped. She had to been like in her late 50s, maybe. And she's talking to me in Vietnamese. I don't understand what the hell she's talking about. And then she takes her phone and like holds it up to me so I can see. And it's just this grid gallery of all these naked women. And she's like, you take, pointing at the girls. I'm like, man, I just got here. I'm not buying a prostitute off some lady on the street. Like, come on. Like, what the hell is this? And it was late, and it's like, the street I was on is all very quiet. It's not like a bustling area where I was. Um, only during the day. But yeah, that was hilarious. A lot of hustlers here. Like everybody hustles. Everybody hustles something. Okay. It's really weird. Oh, and the other weird part is that there's really, really, really niche stores. Okay. Like little shop. Okay. And all they sell are brass doorknobs of different shapes. That's it. Nothing but brass doorknobs. The shop right next to it, all they sell are those chromed aluminum or stainless steel racks that you would maybe hang in your kitchen or in your shower or something like that, like those caddies with the wire. Okay. And they come in all sorts of different shapes and configurations. That's all this store sells. Nothing but that. It's stuff like that. It's like very weird, very, very strange. Like, I don't know. How do you get into that? You're like, you know what? I'm gonna be the doorknob guy. Where was that passed on? His dad was the doorknob guy, and his grandfather was the doorknob guy. Like, how does that? It's like passing on the family doorknob business. You know. But anyways, so back to what I was saying. Like, all of this shit is gravely important. Like, this is what I've been talking about here. This is the shift between male and man. This is the big difference. Okay, you are not pulled by anything, right? You're not pulled anywhere. You're not doing any of this stuff. You're just and that's because what's holding you in place is your conviction to your constitution, right? And this is what I help my guys sort out, right? Sort out what their constitution is such that they become immovable due to the conviction. Okay. The conviction is the relationship, is that space in between, like the self, the constitution, the conviction is the bridge. Okay. So when that's developed, this is what prevents you from being adrift. This is what prevents you from being bumped or tossed around like a leaf on the wind. And like so many guys are like this. Okay, so many guys are like this. They're just so easily bumped, right? And they like freak out or flail about, right? They crash out. They do all sorts of things that really um that that really just show them and the world that they're still just a boy. Okay. And I'm not I'm not trying to like get down on undeveloped guys, right? Because like that's everybody has that time in their lives. Okay. It's not a terrible place to be. It's actually a necessary place that all of us go through. Okay. None of us are just like born fucking Conan the Barbarian. You know what I mean? That's doesn't work that way. Okay. Like in that movie, he was a boy. He spent his entire life just pushing that big fucking wooden thing that was going in a circle. I still have no idea what that was about. Maybe it was like a grain grinder. I have no clue. But he was like a teenager. Excuse me. So, and then he, became this pit fighter. Great movie. You guys got to watch that shit. But but yeah, it's not a bad place to be. It's a bad place to stay. A lot of you have overstayed your fucking welcome in the land of boyhood maleship. Okay, maleship. I just made that word up. Um, Malehood. All right, boyish malehood. You've overstayed your welcome, and it's time to just let this stuff go. And it's not going to come about through watching YouTube videos. It's not going to come about through watching me or any other face that's on a screen. Okay, it's not going to be hidden in the pages of a book. It's it's hidden in the world. It's hidden through experience. It's hidden through allowing allowing what you think is your manhood to be pressed and allowing it to get dented, allowing it to actually crumble because you don't need it. Like whatever you think is your manhood right now, you don't need it. It's manufactured nonsense. It's plastic. It's I mean for I'd say the vast majority of guys, it's manufactured plastic. But it's through those trials, okay? It's through women testing you, and, um, let me just say something really quick about that. When when a woman does test you, and I explained what she's actually doing, she's just testing for rigidity. Like, are you as solid as you present yourself to be? right? Or maybe you're not presenting yourself to be, but she still wants to know, like, okay, maybe he's not being all like out there with his masculinity, but um, let me just see if he's solid under there. And that's what she's looking for. So either way, whether you're obvious about it or not so obvious about it, she's still testing to see if it's solid inside, right? If that granite pillar is in there. And because like I said, she wants to pour into that. Like a woman's ego and her pride, they don't do anything for her. They don't do anything for a woman's transition. It doesn't do anything for her transcendence. It doesn't work at all. Okay. So this is how this is how you grow. Okay. And so it's not about just like, whether it happens or not. It's how you deal with it. How do you handle these things? And I know there's like a lot of like these tactics, a lot of like the PUA guys, they teach this stuff, how to deal with shit tests, you know? And it's funny because like they'll teach you tactics, okay? And while I'd have to say they do come from like a good place, all right? These guys, they basically just don't want you to get lambasted by these women, but it's not enough, okay? Because it doesn't change. Like tactics don't change you into a warrior. War does. You know what I'm saying? You could read about war tactics. Okay, you can learn about strategy and all sorts of things, but it that doesn't make you into a warrior. You have to get into war. You have to face battle, and then you can test some of those tactics or not, and just see how you naturally deal with it. Because the tactics of how to deal with shit tests, that's not going to change who you fundamentally are. It's just you're just going to deal with that one scenario in that one instance. Okay, so like a lot of guys, they'll like the most popular one is like to agree and amplify, right? Like a girl says, "Wow, Justin, that's a really red shirt." Yep. And then to say, it is. And at the store, I was looking for one that was even redder, but this is the reddest one that they had. Right. So I'm like agreeing and then I'm amplifying, kind of like making a joke about this stuff. And that's cool and all. You know what I mean? Like it takes it starts controlling the frame of the situation. But that's not ultimately going to change me fundamentally. All right. I'm still in a reactive position. And this is where I don't want to be. Okay. You don't want to react. You want to just act. You want to respond. Okay. And I would say that you don't even necessarily need to amplify. Well, that's a really red shirt. I often take people and the things that they say, and I don't know, maybe like I'm on the spectrum or something like that, but I don't fall for or even pay attention much to implied meanings. And I think that's part of the feminization of men is training them to be sensitive to implied meanings. This is a very feminine thing to do. Okay. This is how girls communicate, right? And it's just in these subtle tonal shifts, and it says like a whole statement to the other girl, right? Just a slight tonal shift. And you say, oh, that shirt, it's really red, right? Oh, it's really red. And I'm not paying attention to those tonal shifts. Girls are, because they often have two conversations going, especially with other women. There's the conversation you can hear, and then there's the conversation that they feel. And both of them are happening in tandem. And men have been conditioned, males have been conditioned. I'm sorry, I blasphemed. Males have been conditioned to communicate in this way, first by teaching them to perceive it and to become aware of it. And now to learn how to operate within it. So now you are listening, thinking, and communicating like a woman. I don't do these things. I don't even pay attention to the tonal shifts and all that bullshit. So the girl says, "Wow, Justin, your shirt is really red." And I would look and go, "You're right, it is." And that's it. Because that's all they said. If they were to type it out like on paper, "Wow, your shirt is really red." That's it. Okay. But you sensitive guys who now think and speak and listen like a girl, all of this other shit is heard. And then there's like tactics on how to deal with that to shift it back into a more manly frame. Okay. So I would say learn to just listen for the things that are just said, just the words that come out of a person's mouth and not the implied meanings, because I don't communicate it that way. I don't communicate with implications. I say what I mean and mean what I say. The communication is very, very clear. I don't hint at stuff. Okay. There's no innuendos. Everything is very straightforward. And, because I see that, and this is just me, but I see it as a very cowardly way to communicate. Why does one have to be passive aggressive? Because they're too much of a pussy to be straightforward. What's wrong with you? Nothing. That because they're being a pussy about just being straightforward about, whatever's going on with them. Maybe it's some sort of feeling, maybe it's a concern, maybe whatever it is. Okay, it doesn't matter. But they're so afraid of certain things. They're afraid of conflict. They're afraid of, I don't know. There's probably a whole host of fears. I don't even know what the fuck they are because I don't think this way. But they've got these fears that prevent them from communicating very just straightforward and succinctly, and it becomes a habit over time, right? So the habit starts off with saying, with this realization of like, oh, I can sort of say what I want to say but still remain hidden so that I'm not saying what I want to say, and they will get like a brief like experience of the feeling that I have without me actually communicating. It'll be this coded language, and maybe they'll pick up on it, maybe they won't. And if they get upset, I can say, "No, no, no, I didn't mean that. I said this." Right? That's how passive aggression type communication works. You always have a fallback. Okay? So um if I said to, some other person like, "Wow, that shirt's really red." And they could be like looking at my tone, my passive aggressive tone, my implying tone that I think their red shirt is ridiculous. And they might they might go, "What are you trying to say? You don't like it? You like, hey, if you got something to say about my clothes, just say it." And then you can fall back and deny your tone because you can always blame them for hearing something that you didn't say. Okay, because you can't play it back. And you can always blame them for thinking, oh, they just want to hear that sort of stuff. They say, no, 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 no. I just said your shirt is really red. I actually like it. See, and now you can completely deviate and change the direction, making them feel like they're misperceiving something, which is a minor form of gaslighting. Males gaslight because gaslighting is a female thing. Okay. Trickery of language, trickery of perception, trickery of moods. Okay. No, men, we operate with clarity, clarity. And that begins with having clear communication with yourself, being honest with yourself, not defending your ego, not defending your pride, not defending this bullshit self-image that you have. That's just a fucking concoction that you've built up like Legos over the years. But with the strong enough hit, the whole thing will shatter easily. And then you spend time online, like taking little whacks at each other's Lego built up identities, right? To see who can, move whose little pieces more. Again, feminine, right? This is not how men operate. Men operate with simplistic, straightforward clarity. And so when you are communicating with yourself this way, you get very, very comfortable. And what happens is, yes, your ego will be challenged. That Lego built up plastic identity that you think is you will be challenged. Your pride will be challenged. Everything that you think you are will be challenged. And that's a good thing because everything that you are up to this point, for the most part, you did not choose. It's something that happens to you. It was formed without your conscious thought. I wouldn't put it in the category of, victimization or something like that. It's not that drastic, but you didn't put conscious thought to this identity of yours. And the thing is that once you realize how malleable much of it is, you can basically create anything you want. You can rewrite the the synaptic connections in your brain. The brain is fluid, right? It's called neuroplasticity. So, and I do this with my submissives all the time, creating new relationships to certain stimuli. And then the perception, the belief, the interaction, it all shifts. Like it's slow, okay, because we're dealing with human squishy brains here, not Legos or computer code or anything like that. It's not that simple. But so it takes a little bit of time and consistency, but it does work. And next thing you know, there's this whole new perception of herself, which changes how she shows up in the world, how she feels about herself, right? You gotta understand, like a lot of these girls out here, they can't stand themselves. They hate the way they look, especially. They hate the way they sound. They hate their hair. Like they might have like one thing about themselves that they like. They're like, oh, I've got really nice hair. I've got really nice tits, right? And it's always in comparison to other women. So they're all just kind of like looking at each other, looking for fault, and looking for ways they can prop themselves up with respect to the other. So they can say, oh, that girl's really cute, but my tits are bigger than hers, right? Or something along those lines, or my ass is nicer than hers, or whatever. They look for something. Okay. So it's like a tear down and a boost up at the same time. It's very strange. And for the most part, they're largely, you know, just reflecting this all around each other. So this is why it's gravely important that you don't do this. Like as a guy, you don't do this. You don't want to operate in the same way they do. You don't want to communicate in the same way. You don't want to think in the same way. You don't want to behave in the same way. You don't want to perceive things in the same way. Nothing. And when you are this way, it's like a breath of fresh air. And sometimes it's jarring. Quite frankly, sometimes it's jarring. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's incredibly alluring. Either way, like, but when you're there, like, you don't care. It's like, who gives a fuck, right? But it's not this abrasive who gives a fuck. It's like, uh, it's, I don't know. I'd say it's like gentle indifference. Okay. Because like true indifference can be kind of cold. So it's maybe like warm indifference, lukewarm. Yes, lukewarm indifference. Yeah. But sorry, I was just reading some comments. But but yeah, having that lukewarm indifference is, from what I've experienced, is quite alluring, right? Because if you're not if you're not swayed, you're not affected, you're not moved in any kind of way, that isn't cold, right? Because it's easy to become immovable when you're cold. Okay. But now you're not really here. You're not fully present. You're kind of shut off. You don't want to do that either. Okay. Like what woman can find warmth um, from someone who's so cold, right? You want them to be able to find warmth within the hearth of a man, right? He's he is all things. He is all things to her. He is the stillness within her chaos, right? He is the container. He is the hearth. Like it's all things, right? The resting place so that she can let go of all that stuff. And it's a kind of a weird it's kind of a weird state to be in because you don't really you don't really care too much about it. It's a strange thing. It really is. Um, it's like but the thing is though is that when you choose to care, you can care greater than you did before when you were like afflicted with nice guy syndrome or when you were a simp. See, because when you have those illnesses, you think you're caring and your attention is really great, but it's actually nothing. It's total bullshit. All the stuff that you think you do out of romance or love or how great of a guy you think you are, it's all self-serving. It's all completely self-serving. And when you have let go of that stuff, you've expunged it from your system, and you start having a more of that, say, like lukewarm indifference. When you are giving, when you are loving, it's not attached to anything. It's not attached to your sense of goodness. It's not attached to needing validation. It's not attached to fear of like, oh no, um, what bad thing might happen to me if I express this, this good feeling towards this woman. Those tethers aren't there. So that these actions, be it they're loving or romantic or whatever you want to call it, they can stand easily on their own. There's no tethers going into you, making it difficult or painful or whatever. Like you can easily tell people that you love them. You can easily tell a woman that you love them very easily. There's no cost to it, right? Because like the world of men, his cup is full. So I can give and it just fills. There's no like, oh geez, let me watch my account here because I have a finite amount to give. And oh geez, if I give this, I'm watching to see if I get in return what I've given. Right? That's all fear based. Okay, which actually makes your cup finite. So it's this self perpetuating circle, right? It's a very vicious circle. But when you're on the other side of it, it doesn't fucking matter. Because you don't have any of the care that you thought you did. These actions, these words, these expressions, they can exist just simply on their own without attachment. But i- it's again, it's sort of like the submissive when you free her from herself, but you have to do it yourself. You have to free yourself from yourself. Um, and then once you're there, you can operate very, very easily. It's super easy to communicate. There's no fear or discomfort in having any sort of thoughts, having any sort of words or taking any sort of actions. And no fear and no discomfort. It's a it's a wonderful way to live. Wonderful. But you have to start with releasing yourself from your own bullshit that you actually think is you when it's not. And it's a process. Okay. I know you young guys really want things done yesterday and you want to be able to have it done at the press of a button or watching a certain video and being like, oh yeah, I'm so inspired. Inspiration is fun and it can get the ball rolling. Okay. But um, if during my art career, if I relied solely on inspiration, oh boy, I'd still be developing it. Inspiration comes and goes. Like you can't tell when it happens. And when it happens is really great, right? Because it can shift the way you see things, give you newfound energy. And that's awesome. Okay. But it's you can't use inspiration. And that's part of why a lot of guys get addicted to being in the throes and the drama, the soap operas of the manosphere on YouTube. Okay. And it's over the years is becoming more and more and more like a soap opera with actual like characters as a cast. This guy said this guy said that. Oh my gosh, there's evidence of this. There's evidence of that. Who said what? Oh no, there's, lawyers said they were called, defamation sort of shit. Like it's such a waste of time, such a waste of energy. I don't understand it. Like my grandfather would be like, they're doing what? Chat rooms? The fuck is a grown man 30 some years old in a chat room for? Uh-oh. My battery on my laptop is about to die. All right. So instead of trying to resituate all my shit, I'm going to just pull this one to a close. Someone said about vlogging, so maybe I'll do that tomorrow when I'm in town in Sapa before I hit the bus to go back to Hanoi. And once I'm in Hanoi, I'll do some vlogging there. So before I drop all the power out, I'll bid you guys a good evening here. It's 10:35 p.m. And thank you for watching on the live. And again, thank you for the folks that are watching on the replay. If you have any questions, hit me up on social media or email. All the information that you could possibly need is in the description of this and every other video. Thanks again, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.